And that way I won't, there we go. That way I won't forget.
All right. And then there may be a couple of places where I will ask people to put things in the chat.
Yep.
And for the sake of time, I'll have them put things in the chat and I'll sort of keep talking. And then I might ask you to go into the
Read the
chat
chat.
and kind of
You
share
bet.
what people say just for
Yeah.
time. Normally I go
Yeah.
around the room and have people do that, but with this many people, it'll be more efficient if we do it
Yeah.
via the chat.
I'm going to pop that out, the chat out to my second screen then. Perfect.
And anytime you want to interrupt me, I'll stop. I kind of have it broken into 3 sections, so I'll probably
Okay.
stop and ask for questions. But if people have questions along the way that you feel like are relevant, don't be, or if I
Okay.
kind of skip over something, don't be afraid to interrupt me and
Great.
ask
So I'll
questions.
keep monitoring the chat box. And so if you're encouraging people, like if you have a question, put it in the chat, or
Okay.
I can monitor and then just interrupt you if I see something that seems particularly relevant, or when you pause, I can catch up any questions.
Okay. Great.
Sounds good. Well, I'll wait another minute or two, and then we've got 9 in the waiting room now. I suspect we'll have more than that, or I
Yeah,
hope
and
we'll
we
have
can
more.
we can like hang out just for a couple minutes before I start. It usually takes people a few minutes to get in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've talked to a few people that are excited to come. I haven't done this in a little while on Zoom. I've done a couple in person now, but it's fun to do it on Zoom.
Well, I hope that we get to a point where, we can have like an in-person conference. Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So,
I mean, during the pandemic, I felt like I was doing this like every week or couple of weeks I was doing one of these because people were
yeah,
so sort of hungry for the education and the
yeah,
connection and stuff. And
yeah,
um,
yeah.
but now
No,
we
I
have
think
all the technology.
I think that it is one kind of wonderful thing that came out of the pandemic, that
Yeah.
we have learned that kind of mix of virtually doing educational things and social community building things, and
Yeah.
then balancing that with in person. There's obviously clear benefits to both.
Yes.
The nice thing with being able to do this kind of education series virtually is we're spread over 5 states. And so
Yeah.
we can come together once a month and kind of see each other.
That is so cool. So
Yeah.
this is Working Equitation USA, and is it then a Northwest region?
So it's USA Working Equitation, and we're Region 1. So it's
Okay.
Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Alaska.
So it's similar to like
Yeah,
USDA and US.
exactly.
Yeah.
And within, in case it comes up, within Working Ec, there's 7 levels. 90% of our riders are L1 to L3. And then a very small percent are L4 and above. And
What does
L4,
L3 stand for?
level 3, so there's 7 levels.
Okay.
And so L4 is probably somewhere around 4th level dressage. It's a little different, but at L4, you're doing, actually L4 is probably a blend of second, third. You're doing simple changes. At L5, you start adding in flying changes, but it's higher than 3rd level because you're doing half pass into a flying change. You're
Okay.
doing
Right.
3 tempies in some of the obstacles. So it kind of doesn't match up perfectly.
Yeah.
But the majority, like in USDF, the majority of amateur riders are in kind of 1st level, 2nd level dressage type equivalent.
Yeah. I
All
like
right, so I
that.
think I'm going to go ahead and let people come in.
All right. 22
Let's
people. That's awesome.
admit all. Yay. Oh, I see quite a few familiar. Awesome. Seeing lots of people joining. I am going to mute everyone as they're entering. Great. We're going to wait a minute or two to start as we're seeing people rapidly coming in. We're up to about 24, it looks like, at the moment. Oh, it looks like I need to keep admitting more.
It's all right. We'll take a few minutes
Yeah,
and let everybody wander in.
fabulous.
I've decided I want to go out in the first way. Yeah, I'm over it.
Yeah.
Yeah, or whatever.
We're going to mute everyone again. I'll keep doing that as people keep coming in. You will have, it is set up that you can unmute. We'll kind of go over how we'll run things in a minute. Wait another minute and then we'll get going.
I'll let you do the Zoom instructions, Sarah.
Oh, okay. It sounds good. Oh, we got more. It's so funny. I wish it would just, once you hit admit all, I wish it would just keep admitting all. I'll have to keep the participant list open so that I make sure I see if there's.
Yeah, because people will tend to still trickle in after a while.
Exactly. All right, well, maybe I'll go ahead and get started. For those of you who don't yet have a face and name associated with me, I am Sarah McKenzie, and I'm your Region 1 Director. Took over that office in December. And as part of my role as Region 1 Director, I have started this Region 1 educational series. I thought it would be a fun way for us once a month to come together, build some social community, and also hopefully learn how to become better at working equitation in whatever capacity or goals that we have for the sport. And last month, we looked at moving on up, thinking about the different levels, the 7 levels of working equitation, and thinking about where we are at personally, where one starts and where we might want to be going. And so to me, this was the perfect next session. Jen Verheeren with Cadence Coaching is very familiar to me. I have ridden with Jen for, gosh, probably 5, maybe more years, might be even out closer to 10 years, about
yeah,
3,
probably
4 times a year, having the privilege of doing clinics with Jen. But then I've also, gosh, 5, 6, maybe even 7 years ago now, that pandemic causes such confusion with time. I worked with Jen on some career coaching. So I've worked with Jen in different ways. And I think she's incredibly gifted at what she does. And so when I was thinking that it'd be fun to do a goal setting, she was the first person who came to mind. So Jen, I'm going to turn it over to you. And I've asked Jen to talk a little bit about herself, her background, and then to lead us through this workshop. I will keep everyone on mute just so we don't get a lot of background noise. Do keep your camera on if you can, just so that we can see each other and start to put names and faces together. She will have some interaction. We'll have the chat box where you'll be able to write some questions or respond to prompts. And then I believe at times she also will be asking for volunteers, perhaps to unmute and actually engage. So I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to you, Jen. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thanks for having me. And it is so much fun to be here with such an engaged group. That so many of you signed up for this and so many showed up, so many are showing up is really fun for me. I do this particular workshop quite a lot for different groups, both in person and via Zoom. And it's been a bit of an evolution for me, just as my career has been an evolution. The reason I'm here now with you in this capacity is actually because of my own journey. I was a dressage and eventing trainer for 25 years, and I reached a burnout point, which I think a lot of professionals in our industry do at some point. And I did some personal work and some business coaching, and I hired a coach at that time. And it was such a valuable process for me that I got certified as a coach in 2009. And I started to experiment with everything that I had learned in my coaching process, and was continuing my training. And I started to experiment with it with my students, with my writing students. And I had such good luck sharing things like the goal setting process, and, you know, breaking through limiting beliefs and overcoming fear and all of these things that I was learning, that I decided to eventually and very gradually over a long period of time transition fully into coaching instead of teaching and training. And now I can happily and sadly say that I have fully transitioned for the most part. One of the things that there are basically three things that I currently do. One is performance coaching with riders. And this is what we're going to talk about tonight. And the reason I've become quite passionate about doing this work with riders is because it's born of my own experience, as well as now my experience coaching literally thousands of riders. And right about the time that I became certified as a coach, I got bucked off in the middle of a Conrad Schumacher symposium off a young horse, big young horse. And I did not go to the hospital, but it had a big impact on me. And for the first time, I'd been riding since I was quite young. For the first time, I felt fear. For the first time, I experienced sitting on a horse and having her flick an ear and me going into panic. And there was a lot at stake for me at that time, because I felt suddenly as if I was not going to be able to keep being a professional. I was afraid of failing my client who purchased the horse for me. I was afraid of failing this horse that I had recently developed a relationship with. And so this took me on a journey. I was so desperate to figure out my fear and to get through it. I did all the normal things. I hired a sports psychologist. I read all the books. I tried lots of different training methods. And the culmination now of what I have do with riders when it comes to not only overcoming fear, but elevating your performance and being able to get into an ideal performance state, both for training and for competition. It is the result of now my own journey over the last 10 15 years, as well as working with so many people. So what I'm going to share with you tonight is now sort of time tested, and it's very pragmatic and science based, but also very energetic, because our relationships with horses are so acoustical and so reliant on our own emotional state that it's very important to me that everything I do not only be science-based, but also be oriented toward elevating and improving our relationships with our horses, not only performing better and achieving our goals and all of that. So I want to preface this by saying that I do this as 90 minutes on purpose. I have learned that I cannot do this workshop in an hour. I have been told I'm a little bit of a fire hose. We are going to cover a lot in a short period of time. And my request of you is that you not worry about taking notes. You can take notes if you want, but don't worry about getting all the information. Don't hang out in your left brain and kind of focus on getting it all, because Sarah and I will make sure that you get access to the slides. You can email me with questions afterwards. All of this is in an online program that I have that's available to you. You can go through all the information in a very methodical, self-paced way. If you feel like you don't get it all tonight. So my request is that you stay present and curious and kind of activate that imaginative right side of your brain as we go through this process. My intention always, whether I'm doing a coaching session or a writing lesson or doing a workshop like this, is that you leave in some small way changed, that it's not just about getting education or learning cognitively. My wish is that you experience some sort of a perspective shift, or that you have some sort of an emotional experience, or that you gain something that you didn't have before. So that is my goal for tonight. And normally I do introductions and things like that, but we've got so many people, we're not going to do that tonight. We're going to jump right in. We're going to spend 30 minutes on goal setting and strategic planning for riders. And malfunction. All right, no, we're already. And why this is so important, you know, when I first started doing this years ago and I became sort of known for goal setting, I hated it. I felt like it was sort of a didactic and boring and not something that I wanted to become known for. But I have changed that because I have come to fully believe that the goal setting process is infinitely creative. And, you know, we have some ideas about goal setting and strategic planning in our culture. You know, a lot of people say to me things like, you know, I don't like to set goals because, you know, I'm afraid I'm going to fail. And I don't like to set myself up for failure. Or I don't like to set goals because I don't like to limit myself. I don't know, you know, I don't want to miss out on something by setting a goal and for something else. And goal setting, in my view, is not about setting ourselves up for success or failure. It is about setting off in a direction, motivating ourselves to do something that is meaningful. And whether we actually achieve the measurable result or not in the end doesn't really matter, because we will have changed and grown and evolved in the process of setting the goal. So the strategic planning process has 4 parts. Vision, we're not going to spend a lot of time on tonight, but goals are only valuable when they are set within the context of a larger vision that is meaningful to you. I think of a vision as like your clearing in the woods. It is your vision of where you're headed, not just next month or next year, but what is this next chapter of your life look like? How does your riding fit into your life and how it looks? Why does it matter? So I have a homework assignment for you. We're not going to spend a ton of time on vision tonight, but what I'd love for you guys to spend a little time with after this in the next few days is sit down with yourself and really think about, you know, if you and I were to run into each other 5 years from now, what is it that you would love to say had happened in your life? And it's not about the things that you have attained necessarily or your accomplishments, but it is about what have you learned? What are your days like? What's important to you about where you live or your community or your relationships? What's important to you about your riding and how it has evolved? What accomplishments do you want to say that you have had in your life? And I find that when our riding goals are sort of seated within the larger context of our life goals, they are much less precarious for us. We are not so reliant on them, but instead they become a larger tapestry for a bigger life, and we are therefore less vulnerable to all the ups and downs and the disappointments that are so inevitable in our sports. So take a little time, ask yourself to step into what is your vision for your whole life. Okay, so now what I'd like you to do is take a couple minutes. I'm going to set the little timer here, a minute or two, and write down what is your most important current riding goal. What is the one that bubbles up as being either the most challenging or the most important, or the goal that will have the biggest ripple effect for you in your life? Take a few minutes and just write that down. And then I'm going to ask for a volunteer, and we're going to go through, I'm going to take you through a goal setting process. That's probably a little different than what you've done before. Okay, Sarah, do we have a way of identifying someone? So, is there
I'm
someone
wondering
that
if
has
anyone
volunteered
would
ahead
be
of?
willing, if they could raise their hand. I think that you should be able to raise a hand. And then typically you float up to the top. Or if if someone is willing, Ann Burgess.
I
Thank
see,
you. I thought
and
that
put it up
might
to the
work.
top first.
And you should be able to unmute.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then
Hi,
I
Ann.
see Rachel. So we'll start with Ann, and then we've got Rachel, then Dale for our next two volunteers, if and when.
Okay.
All right.
So Ann, share with us what you wrote down as your most important current writing goal.
Relaxation.
Okay.
Both for me and for my horse. We're cut from the same cloth.
So when you gain relaxation for the two of you, let's say 2 months from now or 3 months from now, what would you love to say that you had accomplished through relaxation?
As far as riding, when I'm relaxed, I can, for example, remember my ease of handling pattern. I can remember it when I'm sitting in the bleachers, but when I get in the show pen, I'm a deer in the headlights. So that's one piece. When I'm relaxed, I can breathe and let my horse feel that. And she's responsive to that often. And I guess for my horse, what I would like to see, she knows the aids and can respond to them, but when she's tense or nervous, she braces so much, and I tend to we brace against each other, that she can't even feel me. So I would like to develop more of a feel and have her relax into, feeling my aids.
So when she's not bracing, what is she? How would you describe when you have feel? How would you describe her when she's not bracing?
With a good warm up, she's very soft. I wouldn't say we have attained really consistent self-carriage, but we have moments of good self-carriage. And when she's relaxed and she's very sensitive, so she can work off my body and my legs pretty well when she's in that state of relaxation.
Okay, what is her name?
Zoe.
Zoe. All right. So a couple of months from now, you'd like to feel like you can be consistently relaxed. Zoe's very responsive. You have developed a good feel, and you're consistently able to remember your ease of handling obstacle courses. You guys call them courses, right?
Yes.
What is going to be, so those are all one of those is measurable, and that is that you have, is it one, how are you going to know you've accomplished your goal? Is it going to be that you've made it through one competition with all those things happening, or a few competitions with all of those things happening? Like, what's the thing that's going to happen, and you're going to be able to call me up and say, hey, Jen, I did it?
So we multitask. And I know that this is about working equitation, but I know that we will have attained this when she can stay relaxed in the dressage go. She can stay relaxed with obstacles. And also she does mountain trail kinds of things. I'd like to see her go through some fairly scary obstacles. Water is her kryptonite. So if we can cross water in a calm way, that would be amazing.
Okay, so do you have a piece of paper and a pen?
Yep.
All right. I'm going to read back to you what I wrote while you were talking, and I'm going to have you write it down and then read it back to me and see how it feels to you to say it out loud.
Okay.
You ready?
Yep.
Zoe and I are consistently relaxed during competition.
Got it.
I reliably remember our ease of handling patterns or courses, however you want to say it.
Got it.
I've developed feel, and Zoe is soft and responsive throughout our rides. She is developing self-carriage, and we complete all phases and go through water calmly. All working act phases and cross water calmly. Go through water calmly.
Got it.
Okay, so read that back to me and see how it feels to you to say it out loud.
Zoe and I are consistently relaxed during competitions. I reliably remember and complete ease of handling patterns. I've developed feel. Zoe is soft and responsive. She is developing self-carriage. We complete all phases of working equitation and cross water calmly.
How does that feel to you? How's that sound?
It sounds ambitious.
Yeah, good. So when you say it out loud, do you feel excited about it, nervous, intimidated? Like, what does it feel like?
Yeah, I feel excited by it. I'm not nervous about the goals.
Good, good. All right. So thank you for that. We're gonna and oh, I wanted to just make sure. So one other thing you want to do is put a time frame on it. So at what time, what's the time frame when you will and have gone through enough shows and enough trail rides that you'll be able to test this out and be able to say that it has happened?
Through the summer show season.
Okay, so by the end of summer would be your time
Yep.
frame. Okay, excellent. All right, thank you so much. So I want to show you guys. So the process that I just walked Anne through was one of taking a goal, and her goal to start was relaxation. That's all it was. And what I asked her to do was to go a little bit more in depth into what her intention is with that goal, and also what the measurable result. You probably all noticed that that it was not in the future tense. I didn't have her say, we will be relaxed and we will, I will be able to memorize my courses. Instead, I asked her to say it in the current, as if it was happening currently or as if it had happened in the past. The reason for that is because when you state it in the present tense or in the past tense, it allows you for a moment to experience what it's going to be like to be the person who has already accomplished it. If it's something that's going to take courage or something that's going to be challenging, it allows you in that moment to access the courage that you're going to need to actually achieve the goal. So it's an important exercise to go through in order to really place the goal for yourself in your daily life so that it doesn't stay in the future. I mean, you know how many times we hear people say, I'm going to lose weight, or I'm going to start riding 5 days a week, or I'm going to go work out every day. And all of those goals quite often stay in the future. So for your powerful goal, you want to state it in the present or past tense. In this goal that Anne set, there is an intention, and the intention is around relaxation and responsiveness and connection and feel. And intentions are great, but they are not enough when you're setting a goal, because most often those intentions that we want to have, we will continue to want to improve on those. I like to use the example of, if someone says, I want to sit the trot better, Charlotte Dujardin wants to sit the trot better. We never are going to feel like, oh, I finally sit the trot, as well as I want. It's an evolution. And so we want to have a measurable result that is going to allow us to acknowledge when we have achieved that goal. So in Anne's case here, as an example, her measurable result is that she will have completed a few competitions without having forgotten the obstacles, without having lost the relaxation. So that is the measurable result in her goal. And you want a goal to inspire an emotional response. If it doesn't, then it's probably not worth setting. I don't know if you guys heard in Anne's voice, like when she said it, there was kind of a resounding like, oh, she landed it, right? You could tell it felt good to her to say it out loud. If it doesn't give you any kind of a response, then it's probably an old goal, someone else's goal, or not enough of a stretch goal, not challenging enough. You notice I kind of asked her for some descriptive language. What is it going to feel like? What does that mean? And her descriptive language are things like soft, responsive, relaxed, confident. All of those kinds of words are really important, because a goal is not just a goal. It actually, as we're going to talk about a little bit later, becomes a tool. It becomes a strategy for actually achieving the goal. We want the goal to be concise, about 1 to 4 sentences, and you don't want it to reference the past or current state, and you also don't want it to reference a negative way of being. So you noticed I asked her, okay, if Zoe's not bracing, what is she? So we don't want to talk about Zoe not bracing in the goal. We actually want to talk about her being soft and responsive. And you also want your goal to contain a time reference. And that is not to put yourself in a box and create tension. That is actually to give you a place to half halt and say, okay, what has happened? Have I achieved it? Do I need to move the goal markers now and change something about my goal? So that time reference is really important because it keeps you moving forward. Okay, so the second piece of this, so all of your homework assignment, I hope you're all kind of thinking about your own goal and making it a powerful goal while we were just talking. The next step in this process is to move on to the strategy and the action part of the strategic plan, and to make a list of what actually needs to happen in order to accomplish this goal. So, Anne, in your case, what are the things now in order to accomplish this goal that you either need to do or that you want to begin to do on a regular basis?
I need to be consistent about my my warm-up techniques. Currently, that involves lots of flexion and bending, getting her to free up her ribs and lift her upper back. I find when she lifts her upper back, some of the things that scare her and she gets spooky are less of a factor, and she pays more attention to me.
Okay.
So the warm up is really key. I think also around that idea of feel, when I feel her start to brace, I want to have a toolkit of strategies to work through that in a positive way without making her more anxious.
Great. Okay, so you have a warm-up routine that you use consistently no matter where you are or what you're warming up for, and you have a toolkit. And these are the things, so this strategic part, and you're such a great example, Anne, because one of the things we're going to be talking about for the rest of the hour is really, I'm going to give you tools and strategies that are really relevant to this particular goal, especially. But you want to have specific strategies that you're going to use for yourself to get into that energetic state where you can develop feel and where you can calmly remember where you're going and what your course is. So having a warm-up routine, having a toolkit, is there anything else that you're not already doing that you would like to implement or that you need to do in order to move towards this goal?
Yeah, I'm sure there is. I'm just not sure what it is.
Okay, so that's your homework assignment. And I imagine that by the time we're done tonight, you'll have a few more. So both of these are what I would call strategies. Strategies are routines or practices or habits that you do on an ongoing basis. And as opposed to an action, which is something that you can do, you can cross it off a list. So by the time we're done, and you might have thought of some things that you need to do. Examples of actions would be to send an email or sign up for a show or get a gym membership or, things like that that you can actually cross off a list. So your strategic plan consists of your vision, this powerful goal, and then a list of strategies and actions that you're going to use in order to accomplish the goal. One of the really important things about this goal setting process is that you want to, it's creative. You know, New Year's resolutions are not useful in my view, because most of the time they actually are not a goal, they are a strategy. I am going to stop eating cheese, or I'm going to work out 3 days a week. That is not motivating. There is no visceral response to, oh yes, I can't wait. You know, a goal is really about what it is that working out 3 days a week is going to get you. You know, I want to feel good in my skin. I want to be fit. I want to be able, you know, to ride a cross country course, whatever it is. That's the goal. And then strategy is always creative. Strategy is what changes. Your goal is going to stay the same for the most part, and you're going to be able to experiment with strategy. So you want to always be willing to ask yourself, when things go sideways, instead of telling stories about, oh, just me again, or here I go again, I failed, or it's never going to happen for me, blah, blah, blah. Instead, you want to ask yourself, what do I need to change? Do I need to change the time frame? Do I need to change the strategy? Do I need a perspective shift? Or sometimes you actually do need to change the goal itself. And you know, I think as horse people, we all share this resilience, because we have a passion for a sport that is inevitably just laced with disappointments and things going sideways. So this is something important, like, to keep front and center once you've set a goal. The other thing I think is maybe not, it goes without saying, but our goals always need to be for the benefit of our horses, never despite our horses, or never, you know, in opposition to what is good for our horses or what they need. So sometimes that is a big adjustment we need to make. If we have a partnership with a horse that is more important than our own ambitions and our own goals, quite often we really need to pivot and adjust our goals. By the same token, if our goals are so important to us and we have a horse that doesn't match where we know we need to go and where we want to go, it is our responsibility to let that horse go on and find a horse that is going to go with us where we want to go, instead of doing what I call hammering a screw, where you just keep trying with something that doesn't work. So this is why I believe strategy is creative, and it helps us become resilient. This is one of the side effects of goal setting, is resilience. And we talk about, you know, there are two different mindsets we can have as riders. One is we can have a fixed mindset. We can be very rigid about what we think and what we believe. And we could also have a growth mindset, in which we can view all of our experiences and all of our failures and all of our successes as indicators of where we need to go next, or what we need to learn next. So this growth mindset becomes more and more important as we actually become more advanced riders and have more difficult goals. There's a little book that I love to recommend to people called Man's Search for Meaning. A lot of you have probably read it. It's a tiny little book, but it's the premise of the book is that when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And this is one of the premises of this goal setting process, is that the goals we set for ourselves are designed to change us and make us resilient, rather than to, you know, set us up for failure. Okay, does anyone have any questions before we go on to sort of the next phase of this? And thank you so much for sharing with us your goal. And I'm going to actually probably come back and connect with you at the end after we've talked about some more strategies, and have you update your strategy and action plan a little bit. So thank you.
Thank you as well.
Any questions in the chat, Sarah?
No questions in the chat so far.
All right.
We do have a few hands up, but I please unmute if you have a question to ask.
Yeah, and if
I know you also
we'll,
put hands up because we were doing participation, but
yeah, and there will
Jen,
be
you
more
go ahead.
opportunities for that. So we'll keep those hands up. Okay, so Here's the thing, fear is such a, we have a very narrow understanding of fear in our culture. And I do have people that come to me sometimes and they say, I'm not afraid. I don't have fear, but I have all these other things. And inevitably the list of other things that they are challenged with, fall under my definition of fear. Fear is basically the avoidance of an uncomfortable experience or an uncomfortable emotion. And it includes a lot of things. And if we have gotten to be adult humans, we actually probably don't get to be adults without experiencing these. And this is just a small little example of what fear is. Fear is the sort of the typical type of fear that we think of first is post-traumatic response, that we've had a bad experience and then we develop a fear because of the memory of that. Self-doubt is fear. Perfectionism is fear. People-pleasing is fear. This is really a big one, particularly for women. We tend to like to avoid conflict, avoid having anyone disagree with us, avoid not being liked, all of those things. And those can often keep us in a little box and keep us from progressing, not only in our riding, but in our lives. Procrastination is fear. Performance anxiety is fear. Generalized anxiety is fear. Avoidance of anything. I have trainers say to me all the time, I have this student and, she comes and she just wants to talk for the whole first half hour of her lesson. And then we only have 15 minutes left over to ride. And that's an avoidance tactic. That's putting off the thing that feels hard or challenging, even though it's the thing you love most. Hypervigilance is something that a lot of us as women, especially, we develop. We're very good at fixing things and staying on schedule and making things happen. And this hypervigilance is often very, very useful in the rest of our lives, not so useful in the saddle. Panic attacks are a form of fear. Excuses are a big form of fear. Imposter syndrome is a form of fear. And I would love for anybody else, now that you're kind of hearing this list, if you can think of other things that, other ways fear shows up for you in your life or other types of fear, please put it in the chat, because this just scratches the surface. I like to, of course, ask in a group, is there anybody who doesn't experience any one of these, and usually there's no one in the room that doesn't have at least an experience of one or more of these.
Can someone share with me how to access the type chat, please?
Yes, it should be up on your, do you have a top bar that has all the little icons along the top?
Rachel, you muted yourself again. So I see you were talking still.
Unfortunately, no, I don't have that.
So it might be at the bottom, or if you move your cursor kind of around the top, it should pop up.
Okay,
and then there will be a chat and you can pop it out.
Yeah, it's just, I'm on my phone, so it's just been a little bit weird.
It's really hard on the phone to have multiple things open.
If I could just maybe have a second to talk about fear, because I think a lot of people know what happened to me, and I'm getting back on. And that's a lot, going from 8 months of not being able to ride with the fractured leg and multiple surgeries, and like having the guts to get back on and do it again is challenging. And I'm trying to set myself with like a 5-minute per day goal, that every day I just make that little bit of improvement. And I had talked to a counselor about it, and you can't conquer all your fear all at once.
Who is this speaking again?
I'm sorry, this is Rachel Stout.
Rachel, so I'm assuming that you had an accident, right? And
I was kicked by a horse and shattered my leg.
And so you've been off for 8 months, and this is such a great example. And I want to acknowledge you for actually being so aware of how methodically you are gonna start this process of getting back in the saddle, because a lot of people, we have an ethic in our horse industry around getting back in the tack and pushing through your fear and just do it over and over until you're not afraid again. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that very gradual, methodical plan that you have is really valuable. I call it blowing up the balloon slowly, where you gradually introduce your nervous system to more and more stimuli. But what I'd love for you to listen for, and anyone else here who is also dealing with post-traumatic fear response, is what are the strategies now that you can use of what we talk about tonight as you are doing your 5 minutes in the saddle, and then your 10 minutes in the saddle, and then your 7 minutes in the saddle, or whatever that is, because the acclimation in and of itself is not enough, because your nervous system has now recorded a really traumatic experience. And so even if your mind says, you know what, I'm healed now, I'm on a safe horse, I'm in a safe environment, your nervous system is still going to be saying, get us out of here, this is not safe. And so a lot of the exercises that we're going to be talking about, especially in the final third of our talk tonight, are going to be geared toward specific things that you can do to begin to rebuild capacity in your nervous system to handle more and more stimuli, more and more time in the saddle, and to minimize the alarm system that's probably going to go off for you as you ride more and more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And that's, it's like trying to be brave, but also not trying to be stupid. And, it's that balance between all that's challenging.
Yes. And I'm going to ask you will you raise your hand again when we talk about red light fear and green light fear? Because I'd love to do a short little coaching session with you when we talk about that. So will you raise your hand again when we get to that?
I will.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing. That's super, super helpful for everyone. So Brianna says, I dealt with fear getting back on young horses after my first baby was born, and it took me a while to get my confidence back. I just had another baby, and mentally I have a different mindset, but I'm really nervous about how our first week of riding will go. Yay, perfect timing for tonight, because I have lots of ideas for you. And yes, the what if thinking, and yes, health issues are definitely a form of fear. So awesome. Thank you for all of that. So fear messes with our mojo in a lot of different ways. And when we're thinking about, we can become easily distracted. We can become our brains are obsessed with self-doubt and anxiety and things that are going to go wrong. What ifs are usually front and center, and also memories of the past. Fear is all about memories and what ifs. And we're going to talk about, as a big strategy around fear is training your brain to be focused on the present moment and what you want to create in the present moment with your horse, rather than what might happen or what has happened in the past. Perfectionism can cause you to ride really conservatively. A lot of people talk about brain freezes. If you're in the middle of your ease of handling course and all of a sudden you forget what's next, or in the middle of your dressage test. Fear causes us to dwell on our mistakes. Fear causes us to overthink things and really stay in our cerebral state rather than being able to really be present. You worry about outcome rather than focused on process. And a lot of people say, and I think, Anne, you were kind of talking about this, your horse warms up great, or you can remember your course easily from the stands, but then when you actually get into the competition ring, everything goes out the window. And we're going to talk about why that is. Okay, so and some of this is going to be review, okay, for some of you, but I have a passion now about the fact that as riders, we are all responsible for understanding the autonomic nervous system and very basically how it works. I am not a scientist, and I do not want to understand it, as deeply as a scientist does, but I want to understand it enough so that I can help my horse. We have a very unique sport, you guys. The thing that I believe makes riding different from other sports is that we are fight or flight animals. We are mammals, which means we're fight or flight animals sitting on 1,200-pound fight or flight animals. And our autonomic nervous system is our access to being able to develop the kind of harmony and partnership and feel and relaxation that we all want to create with our horses. And the autonomic nervous system is made up of two parts. The sympathetic nervous system is the part of our nervous system that is the alarm. It is the part of our nervous system that says, there's something here to be worried about. It basically garners our physiological resources. Our heart rate increases, our muscles tense up. We tend to curl over the middle and coil a little bit like a spring. The cognitive processes in our prefrontal cortex actually start to shut down, which is why it's so hard for you to remember, your course when you're competing, but not when you're in the stand, is that when we are in fight or flight and we're nervous or we're in fear, our brain, or the front of our brain shuts down and our body takes over. So this sympathetic state can happen on a lot of different levels. It can be all the way up to panic, where your ears are ringing, you feel dizzy, you may not even feel like you can keep consciousness, like you're literally in panic. Or it can be just a really mild, low grade butterflies, nervousness, anxiety. And we all operate, I think, in our lives on a fairly high sort of sympathetic state anyway. So when we then add the inherent danger of getting on a horse, because we can't get around the fact that riding horses is dangerous no matter how much we strive to keep it safe. We add that we're trigger stacking for our own nervous systems when we add our already sympathetic state from our busy lives, from having, managing the kids or going to work or, whatever the things are in our lives that are keeping us in a stress state. Then we get on our horse and we get into even a little bit more of a stress state. And then we add competition and we're in even a little more of a stress state. So our nervous systems are the sympathetic nervous system is the part of us that allows us to stay safe. And we do not want to get rid of fear. We want to reprogram our alarm system when it starts to malfunction. We'll talk about that in a minute. So the parasympathetic state is the rest and digest part of our nervous system. It is when we are calm, we're able to be very relational, we're able to think through things really clearly, we're able to take instruction if we're taking a lesson, we're able to remember our test if we're riding a dressage test. We breathe deeply, our muscles stay basically relaxed. And this parasympathetic state is actually the state that we want to continually learn to put our bodies in. And this is where the mind and body connection becomes so important, because if we can't attain our own parasympathetic state within our own bodies, how can we expect our horses to be able to do the same? So this is our job, is to be able to regulate our nervous system so that we can help our horses regulate theirs. So this sympathetic activation that happens when there is a threat present or a perceived threat present is what I call the fear cycle. And that is when we have a situation that occurs, whether that is, getting back on a horse after an accident, or going into a competition that's important to you, or having a difficult conversation, or doing something you've never done before. Any situation that triggers fear, we have a thought about that situation. Situations in and of themselves do not cause us to be in particular emotions. It is our thoughts about the situation that cause us to be in the emotion. So we'll have a thought that triggers an emotion. The emotion triggers a response in our body, and then the horse's body feels our physiological response. That triggers an emotion in the horse, and then they develop ways of thinking about certain scenarios or certain people or certain situations. And then their responses then again trigger us to think certain things and have certain fear responses. So you can see how this becomes a vicious cycle sometimes, once we've established this fear cycle pattern, this habitual fear cycle pattern when we're riding, whether it's just low grade anxiety or all out panic. So the sympathetic state is not conducive to the things that are important to us. In dressage, harmony, relaxation, and suppleness are our objectives. And in working equitation, precision, submission, and ease are the objectives of the ease of handling. So we want to, no matter whether you have fear or you don't have fear, all of these strategies are going to be useful for you, because the more you can trigger a parasympathetic state and keep yourself coming back to a parasympathetic state, the better you're going to be able to meet all of these objectives with your horse. So what it comes down to, and this is one of the things that is so hard about any kind of fear or anxiety or nerves, is that we feel disempowered by it. Fear is a very habitual response. We have a usual response to fear that happens over and over and over. And most of us as humans, we're very aware of the emotion. Like people will come to me and say, you know, I'm just a really anxious person, or I get stressed out really easily. And my favorite thing to say is that is not a personality trait, that is a habit, and habits can be changed. So it is our responsibility to understand our habits and how our minds, our nervous system, and our body habitually respond to stress. And when we understand that, then we have the power to change it. So this habitual cycle, this physiological response to fear, what usually happens once we have that thought and we've triggered an emotion like anxiety or nerves, then stress hormones are released in our bodies. Cortisol, adrenaline, those kinds of hormones that we are accustomed to. And those cause our heart rate to go up. Our breathing often becomes shallow and quick. Our awareness decreases, and basically our bodies become ready to flee. Often what happens is our experience of time speeds up. I don't know if you all, done a dressage test, or, come off of a show jumping course or out of an ease of handling course and been like, I just don't know what just happened. I don't remember anything that happened. That is a very common experience when we are in a habitual fear cycle response. Often our thinking gets really scattered. We can get really spooky in the saddle. This is one common way that our alarm system malfunctions, is we are sort of waiting for the what if and waiting for the bad thing to happen. The other thing that happens is that quite often we go up into that alarm state, that sympathetic state, and we stay there. And because we love riding and we want to please our trainer, we want to be there for our horse or whatever it is, we stay in this high sympathetic fear state for a long time, sometimes 45 minutes, hours sometimes, and it's exhausting. So this is really important for us to begin to understand that fear, all emotions actually, are supposed to move through our bodies in waves. We are not supposed to hang on to them. So that's a malfunction of our alarm system we want to be able to change and be very strategic about. All right, so the intentional cycle of the fear cycle is that we have a thought, and that thought causes an emotion, a constructive emotional state. So an emotion like, actually, I'd love for you guys to put in the chat, what kind of emotional state do you want to be in when you're riding, when you're training, or when you're competing? How would you describe that emotional state? I like to call it energetic calm, where you have energy, but you feel calm. A lot of people, like Anne talked about, wanting to be relaxed. Some people want to feel inspired. Whatever it is for you, you want to figure out what it is. What are the thoughts that trigger that emotion for you. And then when you're in an emotional state, a positive or constructive emotional state, that will help you be in a state where you can stay responsive. You can be athletically available to your horse. You can remember what you're supposed to do. It's a state where you're able to feel versus think. And again, you know, Anne talked about wanting to develop feel. And this is what we talk about as riders, of being able to not just think about what the good or the right thing to do is while we're riding, but to be able to feel it. And often we have the ability to slow down time when we are in a parasympathetic state or having an intentional response to stress. So let me see what some of you guys wrote. And let's see.
So we've got calm, present, focused, peaceful, capable,
I love
calm
that
and
peaceful.
alert, joy, relaxed and confident, relaxed, moving like we are one.
Those are great. And then someone said, one helpful image I had about the sympathetic response is to get your butterflies flying in formation. The butterfly energy is good for high performance, but it needs to be organized. I love it. I love it. That's, yep. Nerves are butterflies. And that is, you know, we can leverage our nerves and our anxiety rather than let it interfere with our performance. And that image is a great example of how to use imagery to leverage your nerves rather than let them get in your way. Okay, great examples, you guys. Connected and methodical. I like that. Okay, so any questions so far, or anything anybody would like to add via the chat or in person about, is this why my back pain disappears while riding? Yeah, that's such a great question. You know, people like to talk about that all the time, that when you are in an emotional state that triggers mood enhancing hormones like endorphins, quite often it will minimize pain. And, you know, some of you know, my son not long ago, about 9 months ago, had a very bad rodeo accident, and he is now paraplegic. And he has pain pretty much all the time, except when he's riding. And I find that that is a really, you know, I'm glad you brought that up, Ginny, because I hadn't really made that connection yet with him talking about, you know, why he doesn't have pain while he's riding. But I think that there's probably a lot to that. Brianna says, I had a moment last year where we finished our EQH and I was crying when we finished because it just felt so bad and like I was driving a freight train, and we ended up getting our best score of the season on that ride. The video of me looked amazing, but during it, I felt like I broke my confidence. Crazy how we think one thing, but it's so true. And that is one of the things I was saying, you know, about our prefrontal cortex shuts down. And so we can sometimes it feels like you're underwater. Some people describe even having their limbs go numb. Like we really lose when we're in that sympathetic state, even though it sounds like you were able to keep riding well, Brianna. Your experience of your ride was not good. You didn't feel present and you weren't there. So you're right. It's crazy how nerves and that sympathetic state can mess with our perception of how we're riding. Let's see, Tracy says, my fear is my own. I'm seeing a difference. It's if my body will be capable after a physical breakdown. I'm not worried about danger so much. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, this is what I, you know, find a lot, you know, fear can come up because you've had a traumatic experience. But it quite often can be accumulative over time. I mean, as adults, we really can't get through life without having experiences or hearing about things or seeing things or having more at stake as we get older. All of these things actually increase our fear over time. So, you know, people say, oh, kids, you know, they're just fearless and they just ride around and, you know, do whatever they want and they don't have any fear. Well, you know, they haven't had time to develop fear and develop a survival instinct like we have as we have grown into adults. So that is a really good point that fear can be there and be present even if you're not really worried about danger. Okay, so what I realized when I was dealing with my own fear 15 years ago or however long it was, that all the little I got a lot from all the different resources that I sort of experimented with, but it wasn't, one thing wasn't enough. Like, so what I've learned is that there are 3 ways in which we can and need to intercept that fear cycle. One of them is mental. When I first started my work as a coach, I would say 95% of what I did was around mental skills, talk therapy, very, very much cognitively oriented. And what I've learned is that that only goes so far, because quite often, because our nervous system has memorized certain experiences, and our nervous system is the one that is often reacting to stimulus really quickly, we often don't even have time to think. And our nervous system actually is kicking in even before our thoughts are kicking in. So one of the places I have learned that we can intercept fear is through our minds, but the other 2 are through our emotions and also through our bodies. So we're going to talk about 3 groups of strategies now that allow us to intercept the fear cycle mentally, emotionally, and physically. And in my experience, usually there is not one of these that works alone, but instead a combination of them that help, whether you're wanting to overcome fear or get the courage to move up a level, or, you know, decrease your perfectionism or whatever it is. So this idea that we can intercept at the level of the mind is really important. And the first strategy we already did, and that is to create a goal that is really motivating for you, that's a big carrot, and a goal that is meaningful, and a goal that has a lot of descriptive language that you can use, that you can say to yourself, that you can, you know, I encourage people to write their goals down and expose their brains to their goal all day long, every day. The language, what it means, put it on, you know, put it on sticky notes and put it in your car and in your locker at the barn, and, you know, all the places, so that you can expose your brain to it. We have a part of our brain that's the in the lower back stem, brain stem, and it's called the reticular activating system, or RAS. And that particular part of our brain is responsible for recognition. And one reason that it's so important to write your goal down, to say it out loud, to share it with people, and then to expose your brain to the language of it quite often, is because our reticular activating system, it is responsible for seeing things in your environment that are in alignment with things you're familiar with. So the more familiar you make yourself with what it is you want to create, then the more you're going to actually see those opportunities in your environment, and adopt and be able to manifest what it is you want. So this, and the example I like to use, you know, our brains, you know, if you've got 2 groups of people having conversations, you know, sort of equidistant from you, and one group is talking about horses and one group is talking about molecular biology or something you don't know much about, you're going to hear and recognize so many familiar words from the horse conversation, and the other conversation is likely going to sound like garbledygook. You know, quite often, like I remember when I first got my Toyota Tundra, all of a sudden I saw a gazillion full-size silver Toyota Tundras on the road, and I thought, gosh, did everybody just go out and get Toyota Tundras? Well, of course not. But my brain had just been recently exposed to the Toyota Tundra, so I began to see them everywhere. So this is the power our goals have to help us achieve our goals, or power our goals have to help us overcome fear. All right, so cultivating your inner coach voice. As a coach, both as a riding coach and as a performance coach, one of the things I like to say is that I'm an advocate for your inner coach voice. We are all hardwired to achieve and to evolve and to expand and to learn and to grow. And our inner coach voice is the one that is responsible for that part of ourselves that wants to grow and evolve. And unfortunately, because we're human and because we have evolved from a time when we had to watch out for lions and tigers and bears, we have a very powerful inner critic voice that is quite often more powerful than our inner coach voice. And so I would love to have a volunteer now. I want everybody to write down in the chat things that their inner critic says, things that your inner critic, says to you in your head. Your inner critic is the voice that is responsible for your survival. It is the voice we are, in addition to being hardwired to learn and grow, we are hardwired to survive. So our inner critic is the voice that is benevolent. And when we were younger said, don't cross the street or you'll get hit by a car. Don't touch a hot stove or you'll get burned. But as we grow older, it's the same voice that says to us, you're not good enough. Don't take that risk. You might fail. You might make a fool of yourself. Somebody might disagree with you. You might fall off, all of those things. And then the inner critic voice then starts to actually keep us from living the life we want to live. I'd love to have, some ideas here. Cora says, you can't do this. Yes, this is going to go badly. The inner coach voice is often responsible for comparisons. A lot of people say, oh, I can't go on social media because I just compare myself to others and then I feel so down. Yes, you're not pretty enough. You are hopeless. I used to drive down, remember driving down, the driveway to a horse show and seeing like a sea of, horses in the warm up and fancy horse trailers and just feeling like, oh, I am so not good enough to be here. It's easy for our inner critic voice to tell us that we're too young or too old or too fat or too skinny, or yes, like your bad ankle and leg will not allow you to balance well enough. It's not perfect enough. You're getting too old for this. Yes, often with our horses, we're told that our horses can't go far because of their breed or because of who they are. And we all, that can also be something that kind of gets in our head if we start to have an identity associated with our horses and what they are or aren't capable of. All right, awesome, you guys. So the inner critic voice, super easy. Usually, when I'm in a room of people and I ask for, examples of the inner critic voice, it's like popcorn. Everybody's just, this is not hard, right? To figure out things that your inner critic says. All right, yeah, I think everyone thinks you are, they might not like you if, yes, I think we covered them all. Okay, so your inner critic voice, here's the thing, it is not you. It is not you. This is the biggest thing that can help, like with awareness, is understanding that your inner critic voice is a mechanism for survival. Whether it's keeping you from, applying for a new job, changing careers, signing up for a clinic you're intimidated by, moving up to the next level.
It's hard to see him in movies like this after seeing him as Ken and Barbie now, because I've watched Barbie a few times.
Whatever it is, that is not you. And what I would love for you guys to all do is, for over the next couple of weeks, become the observer of your inner critic voice. Notice when it shows up and recognize that it is a mechanism to keep you from changing. People talk about a fear of change or a fear of success, but it really is a fear of change. As humans, we are hardwired to not love change. Most of us. And so you want to look for the places where your inner critic voice tries to keep you down. Now, that said, our inner critic voice is not necessarily, the bad girl or the mean girl or the mean guy or whatever, but you really want to look at what your inner critic voice has done for you in the past, because quite often they are good drivers, they're good motivators, but then they get to a point where the inner critic really gets in your way. So this inner critic voice, it really is the automatic negative thoughts, I call them ants. They are really the #1 performance challenge for riders. They creep in before you even realize it. And we often, I think, experience our thoughts as we think we can't control them. We think we have to believe everything we think. We think that our thoughts are representative of what we truly believe. And once we learn to identify the automatic negative thoughts, and it's so normal for humans, like this, noticing dangerous things or bad things or negative things in our environment, this is what keeps us alive. This is an important, part of human nature. And so people often say to me, oh God, I don't know why I think so negatively. I just have all these negative thoughts. I don't know why I'm so hard on myself. We all come by it naturally, especially riders, competitive riders. We also have a sport that requires a high degree of precision, and we strive for excellence. And so automatic negative thoughts are a natural habit for us to struggle with. Okay, so all of the things now that we're talking about in terms of mindset mastery and intercepting the fear cycle mentally have to do with ways that we can begin to retrain our thoughts. Okay, and we talked about goals and setting a powerful goal, exposing your brain to the language of your goal. Another one is to cultivate your inner coach voice. Your inner coach voice is representative of your dreams and your ambition and your wisdom of what you truly want and of what you really truly think of yourself, your self-regard. So this is the voice that we actually want to exercise. We want to make it louder. It is the voice and you used when you talked about what you want to create with Zoe, and that you want that feel and that self-carriage and the relaxation. Your inner coach voice reminds you about your vision and your goals when your self-doubt starts to get in the way. It asks you what is really true when you are being really self-critical or hard on yourself, or like had that bad experience in the ring. It reminds you that you're okay no matter what, meaning that you can handle whatever happens. We talked a little bit earlier about a growth versus a fixed mindset. Your inner critic is very fixed, very black and white. You suck, you're not ready, everyone else is better than you, you're, too old, you're too young, whatever. Very, very fixed in the way it thinks. And your inner coach voice has a growth mindset. It's like, let's try this. Let's go for this. Let's take this risk. We're going to be okay no matter what happens. And your inner coach voice tends to have a more calm, committed tone. It understands where your strength lives and understands how to access strength from past experiences in your life. Our inner coach voice is interested in facts versus emotion. And I love that example. I can't remember who it was that had the example of, the emotion of feeling like you have this terrible ride, and then actually seeing your score and watching the video and seeing that the facts told a completely different story. So staying really connected with what is true versus what our inner critic is in the habit of trying to convince us of is really important. Okay, let's hear on the chat some things that your inner coach says. Things your inner coach says. So this isn't the thing. Well, everyone else is coming up with some things your inner coach says. Rachel says, I would love to show L2 this year, but I am afraid my leg wouldn't handle it. I broke my femur last summer right before zones and missed getting to compete. So now I'm afraid I won't make qualifying since my leg just isn't what it once was. My mare tries her best for me, and with good clinicians, a seat coach, and good eyes on the ground every week, I'm hopeful we can overcome the pain. Okay, there's the inner coach voice, right? The inner coach voice says, okay, Rachel, you've got this, you can do this, you've got the resources you need. And then I love how you describe, okay, inner critic says it's not strong enough. I'm not good enough to go up to L2 with such a big injury. And then again, inner coach comes in and says, I'm grateful for my supporters, trainers, and friends who keep reminding me we made it once and we'll do it again. So this inner, and this happens, I'm so happy that you wrote this, Rachel, because we all have this ongoing conversation in our minds between our inner coach and our inner critic. And Rachel, yours is going back and forth and saying, oh, but I'm not going to be ever as good as I was before. And I'm not going to be able to overcome the pain. And your inner coach is like, you've got this. You can do this. Let's make a plan. And that is a great example of how you want to have this conversation in your mind and be able to identify and support and advocate for your inner coach so that you can hear your inner critic, you can acknowledge it, you can feel all the icky feelings your inner critic might instill in you or trigger in you, but you can make choices that are in alignment with your inner coach. And you can move forward with courage because of what your inner coach says to you. Kim says, I am confident. Dale says, the only thing constant in life is change, so go for it. That's a great one. I do know. Find a pain-free solution to ride. Yes. When it comes to the breed of my horse, I tell myself I can prove them wrong. Yes, that's a big one. Like, just deciding you're going to prove all your naysayers wrong. That's a really great place for your inner coach to be. My inner coach tells me to change my perspective from have to I get to. Yes. People, sometimes I always do takeaways at the end of my coaching sessions and people say, okay, at the end they're like, oh, I have to do this and I have to do that. And I always half halt and say, no, it's about what we want to do and what we get to do. That inner critic is all about shoulding all over yourself and trying to tell you what you should do and what you have to do. And that creates resistance. And so you want to really be able to shift that into that inner coach voice that says what you want to do and what you get to do. You've been working hard for this and you're both ready. Yes, that ride was way better than last ride. My position was much better. Thus my horse was straighter and more forward. Yes. And that's a good one. It's kind of adding up your wins, acknowledging wins, noticing wins. That helps keep you in an emotional state that you want to be in. Me and my horse are a great team. I'll trust in my abilities and my knowledge. We do this all the time at home. We can do it here. I can overcome pain by proper training and strengthening. Yes, I love it. Okay. So these are things your inner coach voice says. So really important mental strategy. Knowing your big why is another one. The research around this is there's a performance psychologist who I really admire and respect. I love his work. His name is Jim Lohr, and he has done longitudinal studies with athletes and actually also with musicians. And what he has found, he's kind of done studies trying to identify what distinguishes elite athletes from, athletes who don't perform as well. And the main one that he discovered in several of his studies was knowing your big why. So I'd like you guys to take just a minute and write down, or actually, why don't we do it in the chat again, because that's more fun. What is your big why? Why do you ride? Is it about winning ribbons? Is it about getting a perfect score? Or what is it really about? Why do you ride and why do you compete? Love? Yes, love. A lot of people ride because of the partnership that they feel with their horse. They ride because it brings them peace and calm in a stressful life. Riding, developing a dance partner that gives more back to me. Yes. Building relationship with my horse and living in the moment. I feel happy. My horse is a constant companion. I ride for the beauty of the conversation. Oh, that is so beautiful. Yes. There's no better feeling than connecting with my horse. I was born to do this. I don't remember not wanting to do it. So I do it. I do it because I have to. Yeah. That being feeling compelled that you were born to do it. I ride because that is the time I feel most steady. I always, I'm always learning to be a better rider. I ride because I love it. Trust and partnership. My horse deserves it. He never gives up. It makes me feel like the true me. for the pure pleasure of it. I ride for my soul, for my mom, for the love of the horse, for my inner peace. It's difficult to put into words. It's so interesting, you know, when I talk about this in my coaching sessions, it inevitably brings people to tears because we really don't often like ask ourselves, why do horses matter to me? Why does riding matter to me? And it's usually very, very deep seated and right on the, you know, sort of the root of a lot of the things that matter to us in our lives. So, all right, and I'm going to go back and read all these. It keeps me young, and I love the camaraderie. I aspire to be the rider my horse deserves. Yes, community. Yes, have tears. It's about having that deep connection with my partner and performing because of the joy. Okay, I love it, you guys. So, out of the big why comes the mantra, and a mantra is one of the most powerful mental tools for riders because it has two purposes. It is usually a saying or a word or a phrase. It can be a song, it can be anything. But it has two purposes. One is to fill your mind, so there's no room for automatic negative thoughts, no room for the inner critic. And the second one is to inspire an emotional response. Mantras are not affirmations. They are not directive. So I'm a good rider is an affirmation, not really a useful mantra. Keep my heels down, sit up tall are directives. Those are not really useful. But things like some of the mantras that have been useful for some of my riders is let's dance, or power and presence, one fence at a time, let it be, whatever, you know, whatever you can string some words together or a concept that will help you remind you of who you need to be for your horse. That's a big one. And a lot of mantras, if you can create a mantra that is something you want to say to your horse, those are the most powerful mantras in my experience, because fear and nerves have a tendency to create a wall between us and our horses, a barrier. And so creating a mantra, like one of them, one client I had, her mantra was, it's just you and me, rock star. Like, just really, before she'd go into the ring, she would just say that in her mind to her horse. Mantras are not something that you have to say out loud. Horses can hear what we think, because what we think is what creates the emotional state we're in, which is what creates our physiological state. So we do not need to say our mantras out loud to our horses in order to have them help shift us out of fear. Mental rehearsal. Let's see, before we do this, before every competition, I find myself telling her, we got this, and even find saying it to her during our rides. Yes, we got this is a really common mantra that can help you stay really connected with your horse. Or, I've got your back, or we can do this. So I love that. And go ahead and fill the chat with these, because we're going to save the chat at the end so that you guys can share ideas with each other. Okay, so mental rehearsal. I don't like to call it visualization, because you want to retrain not only your mind, but your body. So mental rehearsal actually consists of sitting as if you're riding. You're not riding, you're sitting as if you're riding, and actually closing your eyes and going through your, you can go through your ease of handling course, you can go through your dressage test in your mind in real time, as if it's actually happening. So you want to feel into what you feel into your seat bones. What do you feel in your hands? How are you breathing? It should take the same amount of time to get through your dressage test, say, in mental rehearsal, as it does when you ride it. So this actually, I have, there's a lot of research that shows that this really works, right? And the reason that mental rehearsal is so valuable is we can actually develop neural pathways in our brains for what we want. We can practice perfect, so to speak, and create what we want to have happen. And when we're practicing physically, we're going to, make a lot of mistakes. So it gives you the opportunity to practice exactly as you want to perform. Now, that said, I do encourage people to practice having things not go so well. Practice, okay, what are you going to do if the golf cart goes by? What are you going to do if there's a thunderstorm? What are you going to do if your horse, does what it normally does? So you're not just hoping that everything goes perfect, but you're actually practicing who you're going to be and how you're going to handle the things that go wrong. Okay, so that's kind of up for you to decide, because actually there is contradiction in the research. There's not a lot of research done on this for riders. And there's contradictions in the research about whether to practice handling things that go wrong within other sports. So you get to decide whether you want to practice the spook and the buck or not. Okay, so we're going to go through this pretty quickly now. So emotional suppleness is the next way to intercept. So we've talked about ways to intercept mentally. Now we're going to talk about one particular way to intercept the fear cycle emotionally. And I like to say that we as riders have a responsibility to be as emotionally supple as we expect our horses to be physically. So emotion, the word emotion means to move. Emotions are supposed to move through us in a wave. They are not supposed to have us by the throat and restrict our breathing and keep us in that sympathetic state for long periods of time. So one of the we're talking about red light fear and green light fear, and we're out of time, so we're not going to do coaching around this tonight, but I want you guys to all kind of think about this, because as riders, this is one of the most important things, especially for those of you that are recovering from bad experiences or coming back after injuries. So in the Hebrew language, there are two distinctive words to define fear, two different kinds of fear. And we don't really have this distinction in our English language or in our culture. And one of them is the word pahad, and it is the fear of something bad happening. It is the what ifs. It is the boogeyman under the bed. It is, all those things that we've experienced in the past that have gone wrong, and we think they might go wrong again. But it also shows up for us as riders as red light fear. It can be a warning and say, okay, should I ride today if there is thunder and lightning? Should I ride today if my horse is so high on the lunge line that I can't get them to relax? Should I ride today if I'm feeling really upset and stressed out? And red light fear is actually fear that you should listen to, that you should temper the decisions you make based on fear that you're feeling. The other kind of fear is yirah, and that is YIRAH. It's very different. It's the fear of inhabiting your life in a new way or taking up more space. It is the fear that comes up when you are, wanting to take a risk or do something bigger and better than what you normally do. And it is green light fear. It is the invitation. It's fear that is actually not based in anything real, and that you actually want to work through or step through or get past. So as riders, we are constantly having to make this distinction and this judgment between what is red light fear and what is green light fear. So really think about that as you're kind of going through your daily rides with your horse. And a lot of riders develop sort of a disregard for red light fear. We feel like, oh, we have to push through, and we have to get back in the tack, and we have to, do all the things. And that actually is like putting a lid on a pot of boiling water, and it tends to make fear worse. So Sarah, should I keep going? I've got about 10 more minutes, or should we?
I think if you have the time, I put in the little reminder about next month's session. It'll be Monday, May 13th. But if people need to drop off, we certainly won't be offended. We know we're at time, but I would love it, Jen, if you have time to finish, and those who can stay, please stay.
I told you it's a fire hose. Yeah, and we're recording this, right, Sarah? So if you have to leave now,
yes.
Then, and I know it's late for some of you too. So yeah, if you have to leave now, then we'll make sure that everybody gets a copy of the recording. Okay, so this exercise I have sort of developed, and I've experimented with it a lot. And it seems a little woo, but it's actually very pragmatic. And what the most powerful way that we can actually train ourselves to experience emotions as we are meant to, babies, horses, dogs, they are really good at processing emotion. You know, babies cry 1 minute and then they giggle the next. Horses can spook at something and then they can be in a free walk on a long rein, you know, within a few seconds. And we as humans are not so good at processing emotion because we learn from quite a young age. We're told to not cry in public, to not let the horse know we're afraid, to not get angry. And so we learn to stifle and stuff emotion. It is a very powerful habit. And it, instead of, you know, being able then to have a threat come and be afraid, and then have the fear go away when the threat is removed, quite often we have the malfunction that happens is the fear hangs on, or the grief or the anger or whatever the emotion is. And it stays in, and because emotion is real, it is a real chemical neural response in our bodies. It actually stays in our flesh, it stays in our bodies. And so the most powerful way to retrain our bodies to process emotion efficiently is to move away from judging it and trying to suppress it to observing it. And this is really hard because one of the things that happens as, you know, our trainers, and I have of course done this, and we all do it. Well, trainers do it because they want to help. They'll say things like, it's going to be fine. There's nothing to be afraid of. Your horse is going to be fine. You're going to do great. There's nothing to be nervous about, all that stuff. And then we sort of are in our minds, we're like, oh, yeah, but then why am I so nervous? Or why am I still afraid? And then that becomes judgment, and it actually exacerbates fear. So some of the norms in our horse industry culture around getting back on the attack and bucking up and doing it again and again until you're not afraid anymore, and there's nothing to be afraid of, and fear is bad and all that stuff, it actually makes it worse. So the fear scale is all about shifting out of that mode into observation mode. And what it involves is identifying where you are on a scale from 0 to 5. And this works with every emotion, not just fear, but we're going to talk about fear right now. 0, no fear, feeling great. 5, total panic, want to get the hell out of Dodge. 2 or 3 are kind of where we kind of operate. Sometimes you might tighten a little bit on the reins. You might kind of hold a little tension in your chest. You might curl into a little bit of a fetal position. All of that, that you can kind of identify where you are. And sometimes like butterflies are just at a 1. Okay. And a lot of us can ride really well at a 1 or a 2, but when we get into the range of 3 to 5, that is when our sympathetic state usually interferes with our ability to ride well. So the fear scale exercise is steps for processing emotion are number 1, to name it. And I can't remember the name of the person who was, or there were a few people actually talking about riding again after an injury. This is an example of an exercise that I would recommend you do as you're doing your 5 minutes, as you're getting on the mounting block for the first time, as you're grooming and tacking up. Notice, where does the emotion start? Where do the butterflies start? For some people, the night before a competition, you actually start to feel nervous when you're packing, or when you're laying in bed the night before, or like for me, it was driving down the driveway at the show. These are all beautiful opportunities to do this exercise and to practice processing the emotion, the nerves, the anxiety, the fear, instead of starting to suppress it and stuff it and wish that you didn't feel nervous. So first step is to name it. Call it anxiety, call it fear, call it nerves, call it shame, whatever emotion is your name for it. And then you want to identify, where on the fear scale are you? Let's say you're at a 3 or a 4. And then you want to ask yourself, where in your body is it? And it's really funny. Some people will right away say, oh, it's in my stomach, I feel nauseous, or oh, it's in my throat, I feel like I can't breathe. And for some people, it's actually really hard to identify where in their body it is, because they've always experienced the emotion as if it was in their head, as if they were trying to control it. So you want to notice where in your body is it, and then you want to ask yourself some questions about the sensation of it. I ask people, how much space does it take up? How much does it weigh? What color is it? What temperature it is? All these silly, seemingly very silly questions. And of course, there's no right answer to any of those questions. But the objective is to retrain our brains to begin to observe our emotion instead of judge it. And then you want to keep breathing, of course, through this process, because breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system. And so you're breathing and you're noticing where this happens, and you will seriously not believe how well this works. What will happen is the emotion will begin to move and shift, and you will actually go down on the fear scale. You will at some point realize, okay, I'm back to a 1 or a 2. If you're in the saddle, you may need to stop somewhere safe. You may need to keep the status quo and stay on whatever circle you were doing, or, at whatever gate you were at. But our tendency when we feel fear in the saddle is to stay busy and keep our horses busy and, shoulder in and transitions and busy. And that is actually it might be sometimes what our horses need, but it is quite the opposite of what we actually need to access a parasympathetic state. Okay, so this is the what I call the fear scale exercise. You're welcome to email me with questions about it. I don't always include it in these workshops, but because of some of the feedback I was getting before this workshop, I knew that it would probably be useful for some of you. So that is processing emotion. Rider's body, nervous system capacity. How do we increase the capacity of our nervous system to handle lots of different stimuli? And one of the things that's super interesting to me, is as fight or flight animals, riding fight or flight animals, we are on horses that we inherently know, and we are trained to understand that in order to help them relax, they need to move. And so we do that. We ask them to go forward. We ask them to stretch. We ask them to bend, some of the things, like Anne was talking about in her warm up. But if we are in any sort of a sympathetic state caused by perfectionism or performance anxiety or post-traumatic fear or any of it, we are going to actually be in a low grade or high grade sympathetic state. And the sympathetic state is all about coiling the spring and not moving. Holding your breath, tight muscles. And so here we are asking our horses to move and be free and expressive and athletic, and we are up there in a little, ball. So important strategies for physiologically intercepting the fear cycle. One of the most important ideas that someone brought up earlier is about this idea of, I call it blowing up the balloon slowly. If our comfort zone is like a balloon and we try to blow it up really fast, the balloon pops. We are going to be repeatedly overfacing ourselves. And we've all seen this happen with horses as well. You repeatedly pop that balloon and you keep getting yourself back into that fear cycle. On the other hand, if you can have a very methodical plan and blow up that balloon really slowly, very gradually, increasing how much you're, how much you're stimulating your nervous system over time, using all these strategies we talked about to build your capacity in your nervous system rather than continually shooting it down, your comfort zone will get larger and larger and larger. So, for example, using that fear scale that we talked about, if you feel nervous when you get on the mounting block, an example of blowing up the balloon slowly would be getting on the mounting block and standing on the mounting block, doing the emotion observation exercise until you're back down to a 1 or a 2 if you're up at a 3 or 4, and then get off the mounting block, walk your horse around a little bit, get back on the mounting block. And you'll, if you feel yourself go up to a 3 or a 4, stand there, breathe, do your fear scale exercise, get down, do it again, and keep repeating that until you have retrained your nervous system to get on the mounting block and either go up to a 3 and a 4 and come right back down, or stay at a 1 or a 0. And then same thing, you get on your horse and you do the same thing. So you dial it way back, your expectation way back, so that you're treating, you're treating your own nervous system as if it were a young horse. We would not take a frightened young 3-year-old horse who's afraid to go to the scary end of the arena and flog it with a lunge whip. We would circle in the safe end of the arena, and we would approach it gradually. We would make it a good experience. We would move around the arena and do different exercises to acclimate the horse to the scary end of the arena. This is what we need to do to for our nervous systems, is treat our nervous systems as if they were a young horse, instead of flogging them with a bunch of shoulds and a bunch of unrealistic expectations. So that's the whole concept of blowing up the balloon slowly, especially for those of you that are coming back from injuries. I think that's a really important tool to take away. Breathing is really, so we have nervoreceptors at the very bottoms of our lungs that actually activate the parasympathetic state. So, we give a lot of lip service to breathing. We know it's important. A lot of us try it, but don't really, pay much attention to it. But I have been, especially since I have been under a lot of stress and been dealing with a lot of grief and fear lately. I have actually been learning a lot more about breath work and breathing, because I actually started to feel like having little panic moments, dealing with what my son's been going through and other things. And it has been very eye-opening for me. It's challenging for athletes to breathe in particular ways, because it can cause us to kind of hyperventilate, and we're trying to think about a million other things in addition to our breathing. So my biggest advice for riders that I think is the most important is to understand, first of all, why it's important to deep breathe, and then to be training and noticing your breath throughout the day, throughout your life, not just when you're riding, and build habits around deep, regular breathing, rather than just try to focus on breathing when you're riding. And a lot of people come to me and they say, oh, my trainer says I have to work out more because I'm not very fit and I feel like I don't have much stamina. And most often, being short of breath while you're riding is much more about being in a sympathetic activated state and holding your breath or breathing very shallowly than it is about actually not being fit or not having enough stamina. So begin to teach yourself to breathe deeply through the rest of the day, so that it starts to become a habit you can rely on while you're riding. And then, of course, there are tons of different breathing exercises and breathing methods that you can research and learn to do if you find that helpful. The other thing about the physiological interception of this nervous system, of the fear cycle, is movement. And, when our horses are trying to move under us, there's a few things, fear, we hold fear in, or any emotion in, by being still. And so movement, wiggling your toes, wiggling your fingers, moving your femurs around in your pelvis, all of those things will help release emotion and release tension. So begin to notice how your body is responding to nervousness or perfectionism or whatever, and begin to address it by experimenting with moving different parts of your bodies in different ways. And horses love it. I've had trainers say to me, I don't know what you told my student, but man, her horse is going so much better. And it's really this like idea of releasing the pelvic floor and moving the femurs around inside the sockets that helps actually release fear for the rider and helps the horses move more freely. So this is an example of, how can we actually impact our horses' emotional state and impact where they are regulating their nervous system by how we regulate ours. And then the third thing that is just an aside, is music. Music has a very powerful effect on our emotional state and therefore on our physical state. So if you haven't tried it, experiment with different kinds of music. You listen to music to transition yourself in the car while you drive to the barn, or when you're mucking, or while you're tacking up. Some people even like to listen to music while they ride, to help shift them from one emotional state to another. And it can be really powerful way to shift out of fear into calm, or into inspiration. All right, so retrain your mind, retrain your emotions, retrain your body. This was just the tip of the iceberg, and I know it was a lot of information. Feel free to, one more power pose. The other piece of this is that we actually, by the way we sit and the way we hold our bodies, we can actually impact the hormones that are released. And a power pose is hands on hips, like a Superman pose. And it actually has been shown in studies to help release testosterone into our bodies. And testosterone is associated with competence and confidence and courage. So that's another thing to really be thinking about. If your inner critic is going crazy, you want to ask, what would my inner coach say? And adopt a power pose so that you can actually change your physiology as you're riding. And there's a reason, of course, that this is the posture that is the most powerful posture to be in when we're riding, no matter what discipline. All right, so I would love to hear some takeaways from those of you that are diehards and are still here. Oh my God, look, it's totally dark in my office. Anybody want to, maybe we could unmute some people. Anybody have any takeaways or any questions?
I thought Anne was maybe raising a hand, but maybe
Yes,
just
Anne,
waiting.
come back. Let's have a quick chat. Are you there?
Yes, I am. I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but I was just clapping. I just think you've really helped me a lot. I mean, I think about it, and this whole thing about fear, I really didn't realize that a lot of the nervousness was really just fear and perfectionism and so on. So yes, I can refine my my work.
Yay.
Thank you.
So you can add, so do you feel like you can add some strategies to your list now based on some of the things we've talked about?
Yes, most definitely.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing today. That was really helpful.
Thank you as well.
Kim, I see you have a hand up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for all this incredible information. And I resonate with a lot of it. I too had a very, very bad accident, and I have been raised on horses, ridden horses, trained horses, been bucked off and stuff. But this one at this age set me back. And that was almost 5 years ago now. And understanding all of these things and what you were talking with Anne about and stuff, my biggest hurdle, and I put in a chat way earlier, is I keep stopping myself from beginning.
Yeah.
It's like I have that, okay, I know what I need to do. I know what this is, the processes and stuff like that. And when it gets time to start, like I said in my chat, I let myself get distracted from just plain starting.
Yeah. So you identified with the avoidance.
Yes.
So one of my invitations to you is to think about how can you not rely on your own self-discipline for that, and how can you set yourself up with some accountability, make sure you have the support and the help. Ask for help and set up some accountability for yourself to get over just that initial hump. Because quite often we want to rely on our willpower and our discipline and our own gumption to get started on things like that. And really what we actually need to do is make it easier for ourselves to get started. And quite often that means some sort of accountability system or making an agreement with someone else. We are inherently not as good at keeping our agreements with ourselves as we are at keeping agreements with other people. So that would be my invitation to you, is to think about that.
That's perfect because that has worked before. It's like if I set a date, we are going to ride this day. It's easier to meet that than if I don't, to set it with somebody else than if I don't have it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly. Right. Good luck. Let's see, Laura.
Thank you so much. So many things, but some of my takeaways were when near the end there talking about how when we were talking about the body, treating us humans as we would horses.
Yeah.
That totally clicked for me in particular as an instructor. I trying to help people work through their fear all the time. That one I was like, oh, I know how to train horses. If
Yeah.
I just apply that to, to help humans, super helpful.
Yeah.
And then for myself, the one that's more something that I need to work on is like the perfectionism is the one that resonated with me. And I actually want to go back through that list, and because I think I didn't think about some of those things so much as the broad spectrum of fear
Yeah.
basics. And so I'm like, oh, I want to go back and look on that. So both of those two things were huge takeaways. Thank you very much.
Great. You're welcome. Yeah. Perfectionism keeps us riding kind of a performance mode where we have pressure, and pressure is, of course, a form of fear. And so to be able to instead learn what we need, each of us as individuals, to shift into a learning mode, and then, going into a training session or a clinic with, okay, what do I want to learn? What do I want my horse's experience to be like, rather than, okay, I have to perform, or I have to show the clinician what I know, or whatever. So you can kind of experiment with what thought patterns help you shift out of performance mode into learning mode in order to get rid of the perfectionism habits. Thank you, Laura. Is it Tracy? Tracy's 13 Pro. Looks like
Tracy, you need to unmute.
Oh, I'm trying really hard, but I'm leading in horses in the dark on my crutches. So there you go.
I
That's
love
my
it.
background. I have to say, what a fascinating presentation. And I love when everyone inputs what their takeaways are, because it reminds me of things that I missed, actually. And so I am honestly enthused and energetic, having heard this. I have not ridden really in 4 years because of an injury. So, but my injuries were not horse related. So I just have a fear of, can I be capable on a horse? And so I feel like I have a little bit more direction on how to go and how to approach it and how to think about it. But I love the strategic planning approach to it. I would never have thought about applying those principles to fear. And so thank you so very much. I'm jazzed I got to be part of this and appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you, and enjoy getting back in the tack.
We'll see when.
Well, I think I'm going to then take the opportunity to close us out. Jen, thank you so much. Your life is very full at the moment, and I am so honored and appreciative that you made the time to join us. I love the fact that even though we're a half an hour over, a few people had to drop, but most have stayed because it's just so important and meaningful. I know I have written lots of little notes to myself and things to think about, and always learn from you every interaction we have.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I appreciate you, and I appreciate all of you for being here and staying late. And Sarah, we'll send out information. I'll send out information. I do have an online course. If you decide you want to go through this in a little bit more self-paced, intentional, more in-depth way, that's a great way to do it. And I also have room for a couple of one-on-one coaching clients starting in June. So Sarah, maybe we can send out information about that, and also send out the slides so that everybody can go back through them on their own.
Sounds good.
Right.
All right.
a great
Well,
evening,
thanks,
y'all.
everyone.
night.
And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. And we'll be trying to figure out how to convert the recording into something that's shareable. I do have the first session recorded, but I still haven't figured out. It lives in USAWE world, and got a little distracted with too much going on. But I will revisit how to get that recording available to people.